Hello and welcome, friend. I'm Thorn the Scald, a master of history plundering the past one raid at a time. I already teased a bit of Norse cosmology in the previous lecture, but since most of that got buried under a long lecture about sources, we should probably do a quick review before we get started. The origin of the Norse cosmos was a story of ice and fire. No, not like the book behind Game of Thrones. I'm talking about the void Ginnungagap and the polar opposite realms of Niflheim and Muspellsheim. Although its name is hard to pronounce and remember, Ginnungagap was a void, or gap, between a world of ice, Niflheim, and a world of fire, Muspellsheim. Over time, poisonous rime flowed into Ginnungagap from Niflheim, while warm wind blew in from Muspellsheim. When the two forces met, it caused the rime to melt and, drip by drip, produced the first living being in the Norse cosmos, Ymir. But before we talk about him again, let's take a few steps back and talk about those mysterious primordial worlds of ice and fire, which existed before all other things. Although I've used ice to characterize Niflheim so far, its Old Norse name actually means mist region, with Nifl meaning mist or fog, and Heimir meaning home, land, region, or world. It's never mentioned in poetry, except perhaps of Niflhel, but Snorri describes it as, quote, filled with the weight and heaviness of ice and rime, end quote, and that from there, quote, arose coldness and all things grim, end quote. So it's definitely cold, but also dark, foggy, and grim, basically winter itself. In the middle of this dreadful place is a spring called Hvergelmir, which is, quote, the origin of all rivers, end quote. The poem Grimnismal names 49 rivers, but Snorri only names 11, which are, presumably, the ones that are also referred to as Elevalgar, as you might recall from Lecture 2.1. Those were the rivers that carried the poisonous liquid into Ginnungagap, which then froze into rime only to melt again to form Ymir. Muspellsheim is the exact opposite of Niflheim, but it's not a tropical paradise. Oh no. It's a hellish landscape that Snorri describes as, quote, bright and hot, as well as, quote, flaming and burning. He even mentions that, quote, it is impassable for those that are foreigners there, end quote. So if you're not a native to Muspellsheim, you'll probably step in a pool of lava or combust into flames somehow. Not a fun vacation spot. But here's the thing. It's not actually desolate. Muspell's kindred dwell there. Yep, you heard that right. This world is named after a giant, probably, who was called Muspell. We don't really know anything about him, but his kindred are sometimes referred to as fire giants. They are the ones who will, as we'll learn in a later lecture, overcome the gods and burn the entire world. Their most famous member is a giant named Surt, who defends the frontier of that land with a flaming sword. Pretty cool, but also dangerous. As exciting as that may be, though, the really important stuff actually happens in the space between these two perilous worlds, Ginnungagap. Of course, you've already heard a summary of what happened there in the last lecture, but if you've forgotten what happened, it's a very Norse way to kick off a story. Yep, it's the first genealogy of the Norse cosmos. Ymir was the first, even though Surt was already flexing in Muspellsheim somehow. He was born from the rime that dripped in Ginnungagap. The frost giants all descend from him, for they were born from his sweat and limbs as he slept. A primordial cow named Audhumla nurtured them with 4 rivers of milk while she occupied herself with licking ice cubes of salty rime. She licked one of those ice cubes for 3 days, which gradually revealed a man named Buri, the first of the Aesir, the gods, technically. Snorri says that he was, quote, beautiful in appearance, as well as, quote, big and powerful, end quote. Well, this boy married a frost giant woman, presumably, and they had a son together named Bor, or Bur. This man also married a giantess named Bestla, and they had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. I think it's worth mentioning that this means that Odin is actually related to the giants through his mother's line. It's actually pretty common for the gods to marry and fall in love with those from other races, especially giants. But anyway, these boys, Odin, Vili, and Ve, decided to kill Ymir, even though he was technically their maternal kin, and create the world of Midgard using his body parts. Pretty gruesome, I guess, but in doing so, they bring order to the cosmos. They took molten particles and sparks from Muspellsheim and placed them into the sky, which they had made from Ymir's skull. These became the stars. Some of these were fixed into place, but others were allowed to move along a wandering course, which was decided by Odin, Vili, and Ve. Those were the planets as they are seen from Earth. In this way, the cosmos was filled with starlight. It was around this time that a giantess named Night was born, and she was, quote, black and dark in accordance with her ancestry, end quote. With her 3rd husband, who was of the Aesir line, that is, the gods, she had a son named Day. Odin placed Night and Day in the sky, giving each a chariot and horse to guide them. Meanwhile, another person had children named Sol and Mani, the sun and moon. These children they tossed into the sky above because their father was arrogant of how fair and beautiful his children were. Sol's chariot pulls the sun, which the gods had created to illuminate the worlds out of the molten particle that had flown out of the world of Muspel. Mani, on the other hand, guides the course of the moon and controls its waxing and waning. After that had been done, the gods gathered and named the night and the hours, the morning, the midday, the afternoon, and evening, so they could tell time. They did all of this immediately after making the earth, which they formed from the various parts of Ymir. His blood became a deep sea that encircles the earth, which is circular around the edge. Then the gods gave land to the races of the giants, and so the shore of this sea became their home. Yet, because there was hostility between the gods and the giants, the gods made a fortification round the world, using Ymir's eyelashes. This was Midgard.